So as you can probably tell, I'm still in the foothills of the Indian Himalayas, still on my Vedic astrology course, and it's still road melting hot before the monsoon gets here. So hot that once again the giant family of monkeys that live outside my room have disappeared today. Yesterday they came through. I'm fortunate to have a giant fig tree outside my room and also a lychee tree, and they came through yesterday and went through the fig tree. So either they're still off digesting all their figs, or they're escaping the heat at midday like a sensible people should do. But instead I've decided to continue with my life's journey of opening this door and exploring the scientific hypothesis that whoever created this is using light, electromagnetism and vibration to communicate with this and they are using the same electromagnetism, biophotonic light and vibration to communicate with their 1 quadrillion of these to communicate and act as micro antennae for energetic sensing. I want to try and explain the revelation, the epiphany, the ontological shock of how a 3 billion year old creation powering every living cell on the planet, which has never been improved upon and uses quantum physics principles of quantum tunneling, coherence and entanglement, can only be explained by either the world's greatest random accident or designed by creative intelligence. So I'm going to go inwards to explore the mitochondria while I simultaneously go outwards to explore the universe, and I invite you to come on this exciting journey with me. Okay, so I'm sitting outside where I'm staying at the moment. These are trees outside my room where the monkeys come and visit me in the morning. We'll see if they turn up today. But I was quickly going to take us through some pictures I've drawn to explain some of the concepts in a little bit more detail. So the first one, this is just a quick reminder of what a bacteria looks like. That's the flagella, that's how the bacteria get around. That's the DNA of the bacteria. That on the inside is the cell membrane, and that's the cell wall, which is a rigid structure. These are how the bacteria attach themselves to surfaces. But the key take-home message here is the bacteria uses the cell membrane, the inner membrane, to pump protons across. It's got very similar respiratory proteins to us in the cell membrane here, and the protons are pumped across the cell membrane into that space between the cell membrane and the rigid cell wall. Now, fortunately for us, bacteria are limited in energy production by their surface to volume ratio. So if the volume of the bacteria gets too big, the cell membrane doesn't enlarge proportionally, and so the bacteria gets into energy problems because not producing enough ATP by the proton motive force in the mitochondrial membrane, which is why bacteria, who have been around for 3 billion years according to science, have stayed small and unicellular organisms. There are no massive bacteria roaming around. They're dramatically smaller than our cells, and there are no multicellular bacteria. They have remained small and unicellular because of surface to volume ratios and how much energy they can create because of the cell membrane and cell wall. Right, now let's go on and have a look at our mitochondria. and we're going to have a look at in closer detail about the inner mitochondrial membrane soon, but I just want to get an overview before we begin. So the take-home messages are, and I've discussed this in previous videos in detail, but this is the inner mitochondrial membrane here, and this is the outer membrane of the mitochondria, and the respiratory proteins are in the inner mitochondrial membrane, and they pump protons from the mitochondrial matrix, which is a special water inside the mitochondria. They pump it across these membranes into this intermembrane space here, and as when the pressure builds up, it bursts back through the inner mitochondrial membrane to create the ATP. But some of the important things, so you can see that the main energy sources for the mitochondria are carbohydrates in the form of glucose and fatty acids. Protein can be used for an energy source, but it's not very efficient and it doesn't create much energy. Its protein is more designed to be breaking down into amino acids and rebuild our proteins rather than a source of energy. Up here you've got what mitochondria respond to. You've got electromagnetic frequencies, you've got vibration, you've got light, you've got signal molecules, which we've talked about in the past and we'll talk about again, and we've got temperature. Down as here are the things which mitochondria need to function properly. So we've got thyroid hormone, B vitamins, carnitine, and carnitine, which helps pump the fatty acids into the mitochondria as an energy source. They need vitamin C to work properly. We've got quantum tunneling, which we've talked about, they need to use. We've got quantum entanglement we need to use, and I've got magnesium, which is an incredibly important part of mitochondrial function, because not only required for ATP production, it's also required for moving ATP around areas needed and storing ATP. And finally, we've got the things which mitochondria produce. They range from light to electromagnetic frequencies, to water, to heat, to ATP, carbon dioxide, free radicals, signaling molecules, melatonin, of course. I've left the bottom one blank because every time I do a new video, I add something else. But that's really the take-home messages. So glucose and fat are the main sources. Mitochondria detect and respond to electromagnetic frequencies, vibration, light, signal molecules, and temperature. They need thyroid hormone, and thyroid hormone also helps push the food into the mitochondria to be converted into energy. They need thyroid hormone, B vitamins, carnitine and vitamin C. They use quantum tunneling, quantum entanglement, and they need magnesium to oversee the whole process. The B vitamins, along with the thyroid hormone, are the shovelers of the coal into the engine of the steam train. So that's how the food gets into the mitochondria, and then they produce light, electromagnetic frequencies, water, heat, ATP, carbon dioxide, free radicals, signaling molecules, melatonin, and whatever else I decide reserve the right to add at a later date. So let's go and have a look next at some new research on the mitochondria and coenzyme Q10. Okay, finally let's talk about the scientific study today. For today, it's a bit windy, it's late, but that's a Himalayan I should say, sunset down at a river which is dry now but flows into the Ganges, and eventually when the monsoon starts we're going to be lucky if that wall stays above water. So that's how high and flowing this river is going to get. But look at that sky sitting over the foothills of the Himalayas. So let's have a talk about this week's scientific study, which is about coenzyme Q10, which I'm a huge fan of. There's two versions, the oxidized version, ubiquinone, and the reduced version, ubiquinol, and it's a long discussion about which one's best and for whom. That's not something I can talk about in a video because it requires some assessment as to what you want to get from it. But most of the time I personally take the ubiquinol, the reduced version. Let's have a look at what the study found though with the effects of coenzyme Q10 on the proton motive force. Because we know, and I don't know if I talked about this morning, we know that it shuttles electrons along the inner mitochondrial membrane, and it shuttles them from respiratory complex 1 and 2 to respiratory complex 3. And if I didn't do that this morning, then I'll do it tomorrow morning, because it's very important to understand how those electrons are transported along the inner mitochondrial membrane. And coenzyme Q10 is a huge one because it shuttles, as I said, from complexes 1 and 2 through to respiratory complex 3. Now, what this study has shown is not only does it move electrons between respiratory complexes, therefore creating more energy for us, it also accelerates the proton transfer across the inner mitochondrial membrane to the intermembrane space, which increases the pressure of the protons in the intermembrane space, so when they burst back through, they spin the ATP very effectively. So the more protons we can pump across the membrane, it's like pumping water up a hill and then letting it all flow back down to spin turbines. Check out this video. And by pumping more protons across the inner mitochondrial membrane, by shuttling more electrons, it also works by it makes the inner mitochondrial membrane less resistant to the protons being transferred across it. So you're getting more protons because you're moving more electrons, but you're also getting more protons pushed across against their gradient because the inner mitochondrial membrane gets less resistance. And my friends, brothers and sisters, science has called that wonderful phenomenon the proton collecting antenna effect. So write that one down, which is done by coenzyme Q10, which decreases the resistance of the inner mitochondrial membrane, allowing more protons to be pushed across so more can flood back and spin those rotary engines to give us more energy as ATP. Woo, I did it. All right, that's it for me for this week. Thanks for watching. Share the video if you liked it. In my opinion, it's critical information, because if you're not producing energy, nothing else works properly, including your immune system. All your organs need energy to work. So this is foundational in terms of how I look after my own health. And what am I doing now? Just to close, because we never give up, I'm down here getting that light on my eyes, and the DHA, the long chain omega-3 fatty acid in my retina is converting that light signal into an electrical signal, which is telling my pineal gland to start releasing melatonin, so I get a really good sleep tonight. See you next week. Thanks for watching. Like and share the video, and never give up. Bye.